Welcome back to Coffee Powered Systems. I'm your host, Miranda, and I am joined by web designer Jessica Freeman of Jess Creatives. Jess, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here and talk about optimizing your website and having the right content. But before we dive in, I would love for you to share, and you can choose either one, either a book you've been reading lately that you have been loving, or if you watch TV, maybe something that you are watching lately that you'd love to share.
So I will share what I'm watching, but it's probably not very interesting because it's The Office, which is my all-time favorite show. So
Oh,
it's not at all new or exciting, but I think my husband and I watch it like once or twice a year.
really?
So
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, that's one
but
of those shows that it's like you can go back to all the time. I think we all have those shows that we're just like, I'm gonna pick this up and
this
watch it
is this
again.
is like my comfort TV show.
I love that. Very cool.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So, web designing, I have always been fascinated with how web designers, become web designers. So, for you, were you in a corporate position or did you kind of slowly work your way into web design?
So I went to college for graphic design and learned a little bit of web design, but not a lot. And then started in corporate after college and was working as a designer. And it was like my second or third job that they started kind of having me do some web design projects. And so that's when I started to get into that. And then shortly after that, I started actually doing it for my business because I was running Just Creatives basically in college and then ever since college. Um, I've been doing Just Creatives. It was just on the side for a while. And then about a year before I actually took my business full time, that's when I started doing web design and was like, okay, like we'll try this. And I could see that more and more people were wanting websites and asking me for websites. And I was like, okay, so I think this is what I should do. I was a little intimidated, but I was like, I think this would be a good business move, and just in terms of like, oh, everyone needs a website, and I think obviously everyone still needs graphic design services too, but
Mhm.
websites are a lot more prevalent. So then I kind of made the dive, and then within probably 2 years, I was just doing websites, and that was it.
Mhm.
So, and that's what I've been doing the last like 6 or 7 years.
Oh, cool. I love
Yeah.
how, it's that's always fun when you're just like, maybe I
Maybe
should do this.
I should do this. Yeah.
This is actually kind of cool.
I feel like that's how I do a lot of I mean, obviously it's a little more strategic than that, but I feel like sometimes in my
Mhm.
business journey, there's just been moments of like, maybe I should try this. Maybe I should try this. And
Yeah.
then I do. And then sometimes it doesn't work out. And sometimes it's like, that was really smart. Yay.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it when it works. That I kind of actually part of my story too is like that where I was just like, I can do this. When people start asking you for more and more
Hmm.
stuff, that's kind of like, you're like, let me see if I can make this work. That's great.
Yes, exactly.
So, as we all know that there's like a short amount of time to catch people's attention, right? So, what are the best tips you have for utilizing that above the fold space? And for anybody that's listening that doesn't know, that's the space when you land on the website before you start scrolling. What is the best things that we can have in that top area?
Yeah. So, my number one tip here is to always have a really clear headline and make it about what you do and who you help. Like, we don't want to land on your site and it's like, hey, my name's Jessica. Like, this is not the information that people are looking for. I mean, yes, they'll want to know who you are and that kind of thing at some point. But in that
Mhm.
3 seconds, they are like, is this the web designer I'm looking for? Is this the VA I'm looking for? Am I on the
Mhm.
right site? Because, we've all been there. We're Googling, searching, and you're like, oh, is this what I'm looking for? And you land on a site and you're like, this is not at all what I was looking for. Whether it's completely the wrong service or you're like, they don't have the services, it seems, or I'm just not like connecting with them. So a really, really clear headline, no jargon, no cutesy terms. You can use that in other places around your website. I wouldn't go overboard with those things because in general, your website should be really clear. But in that headline, super, super specific. I am a VA who offers whatever, tech support. I am a copywriter who offers blog post writing or, whatever. Be super, super specific. And then I usually would also encourage either a picture of you next to this text because we like to work with people. we like to work with people, not just logos and brands. We like to work with actual humans. But if you are like, oh man, like I really don't like my picture, or maybe you don't have any professional brand photos, use a stock image that is relevant to your services. So copywriters, you can put like, a stock photo with laptops and pencils or something along those lines. Not just, I see a lot of people who make the mistake of like, oh, I found this really pretty, stock photo on Unsplash and it's like a river and a forest. And I'm like, unless you are like a hiking coach or running coach, like something like that, if it's not relevant to your services, we don't need like these nature outdoors photos. We want relevant to what you are offering. Because that, again, just helps give context and helps you look more professional. And so again, in that first 3 to 5 seconds that people are landing on their site, they see a clear headline, they see a picture that makes sense and not a river and trees. And they're like, oh yes, this looks good. And then they keep scrolling and clicking. So and that applies to every page, really. I mean, you don't need that same headline on every page, but a lot of times I see just, on a services page, it'll just say services. And it doesn't have to be like a full headline, but it could be like copywriting and copy editing services, VA tech service. So again, it just gives a little bit of context, and not just my services.
A little more descriptive.
Yeah.
Cool. And what about, should they have a call to action at that point, or is it fine to have it below the fold where you keep scrolling a little bit?
So there's not 100% like one right way here. I usually say like if it's the homepage, don't make it such a strong call to action where it's like, hey, book a call with me. Because they don't even know who you are. So like, they're not going to want to book a call. So in that sense, I might say like, check out my services or something like that. Even sometimes I know people love to put like their opt-in right there at the top. And they're like, right away, like grab my free guide. Again, they don't necessarily know who you are. And so asking them for their email address, which we are all very protective of, is a big ask. You might be like, but it's free. But it's like, but do they really want another newsletter? Probably not. So they really want to make sure that they are connecting with you first before they're going to schedule a call or give you their email address. So you can put a call to action in that top like banner or headline on the homepage, but make it something that's a very easy ask, like just view my services. Now on your services page, you could at the top put like an apply to work with me or book a call or something. Again, I sometimes caution against this because they haven't looked at your services yet. And so they may not have seen your prices, looked at your packages or anything. I used to have a button at the top of my services page because I was like, oh, like let's give them multiple buttons to click on of where they can, fill out the form. But I found that I was getting more people that hadn't actually looked at all my services or hadn't looked at the packages. So they weren't a right fit in terms of budget or what they needed. So I took that off. And once the button was down by the pricing and packages, that helped kind of cut down on those not so good fit inquiries.
Oh, that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said about the headlines, like, I don't know if you've been on my site, but I have a service-based providers, whatever, but I also have a changing phrase, like where the word changes. Do you recommend those or no? Like I should drop that. So it's like,
Um,
better systems, and then it changes, and then it's like, whatever. Like the picture
I
doesn't
think,
change, but the word changes.
yeah, I think those are okay. I think because there's going to be a word or phrase there when someone lands. And so it's
Mhm.
not just totally blank that they're
Yeah.
like, where's this headline? Like, what is happening? So I think they can be a little fun, and it's a way to like kind of describe your services or who you are talking to or whatever. Because I have a client who actually uses something similar where
Mhm.
she has a phrase in her headline that kind of rotates.
Right.
So yeah, I think those are okay.
Cool. And what are the best ways to optimize your website on the techie side of it? Talking like speed or SEO?
Yeah. So speed and SEO are like the two things people worry about the most. Once they've
Mhm.
got the design, they're like, is my
Yeah.
site fast? Is it going to show up at Google? And actually the speed can affect your SEO because Google looks at that
Mm.
site speed. So that also can play into your SEO. But it
Oh
also
wow, didn't know
affects,
that.
yeah, it also affects obviously like the user experience because we don't like slow websites. So
Mhm.
the first thing I say for speed is if you're on WordPress, make sure you have a really good host.
Mhm.
Um, like Bluehost and GoDaddy are actually pretty slow. I do not recommend them. I usually recommend SiteGround or Flywheel. WordPress Engine is good. There's other good ones, but the two popular are actually pretty slow usually. Even if you don't think your site is that slow, I've had several clients who switch away from Bluehost and they're like, "Oh, okay, so my site actually was kind of slow. Now I notice that
Yeah.
it's actually faster." It regardless of what platform you're on, if you're not on WordPress, compressing your images is super, super important. So you
Mm.
have those nice, pretty brand photos from your photographer, and then they're like 10 megabytes. No, this is
Yes.
going to slow down your website so much. And there are free image compression tools out there. Some of them do have limits. Like they'll be like, oh,
Mhm.
sorry, our free plan, you can't upload
Yeah.
a 10 megabyte picture. So you may have to pay for an image compression tool. Keep in mind, you can always like pay the monthly fee, use it for a month,
Right.
and then cancel it. And then,
Mhm.
when you need in the future, come back to it. So, like Tiny PNG is a great site for image compression. Compressor.io is another common one. Or, like, I even sometimes just on my Mac, if you open up the picture in preview for all you Mac users, you can export and then decrease the file size, and
Oh,
that will
nice.
help you compress that. So that's an easy way. There might be something similar on PCs. I don't know. I'm not a PC user. I'm sorry, but um, that's the images are like one of the biggest things that slow
Huge.
down websites. You
Yeah.
also have to think about any third-party integrations or if you're on WordPress,
Mhm.
again, any plugins you're using, those can always slow down your site as well. Now, it's not just like, I'm not saying don't integrate anything, don't use plugins, but
Mhm.
be cautious about how many you are using. So, like, I was
Mhm.
auditing a client's site recently, and she was saying, like, my site's really slow. Like, can we look at that? And she was using like Deadline Funnel, which is like this third-party
Mhm.
platform that uses tripwires and countdowns and all this kind of stuff. She had something that was Facebook for WordPress, so it was doing something for that.
Yeah.
And then there was another something I can't remember. So it's all these things that are running in the background
Yeah.
because they're just these platforms that are 24/7. So just be cautious about how many of those you are using. I'm not saying don't use them at all. Just
Mhm.
be aware of what you're using.
Yeah, they
Um,
can definitely bog it down.
yeah. And then when it comes to SEO and optimizing your site, like SEO is so overwhelming for people, and there's so much that goes into it. Literally, there are over 200 different factors that go into SEO, and they're all kind of weighted differently. So, some of them, it might be like, oh, you are deducted 0.25%, for this like penalty. And some it might be like minus 100 points. You lose. Not that they
Wow.
actually have a point system, but I'm just, they're weighted a little differently. But when it comes to SEO, the number one thing I remind people of is just be specific. The more specific you can be in your page titles, your product titles, your blog post titles, the better. So instead of just saying, oh, I'm a virtual assistant, like, and putting that in your title, put like virtual assistant for service-based business owners, virtual assistant for photographers, copywriter for dietitians, whatever it is that you are. So if you can be more specific in what services they are, who you serve, services you offer. And I mean, if especially like I know a lot of VAs are very specific. They're like, oh, I'm a Kajabi VA, or I'm a WordPress VA, or whatever. Like, use those platform names in your titles as well. And so this goes across all of your pages, posts, anything like that. I always talk about, like, if blog posts, let's say you're writing a recipe or whatever, and it's like breakfast smoothies. Okay, well, there are like a million breakfast smoothie blog posts out there. So we're going to need to be a little more specific. So it might be like 6 protein breakfast smoothies for children or women, whatever. So like, I've added how many are. I've added what's in it, like protein. It's breakfast. So I'm saying it's breakfast, not dessert or dinner or like whatever.
Right.
And then I'm saying who it's for as well, which is children or women or whoever you're choosing. So anytime you can do that, it's going to help, because people are very specific. I mean, yes, people might just be searching smoothies, but it's gonna be really hard to rank. So those people who are searching for protein smoothies for breakfast, you will have a higher chance of showing up. So the more specific you can be, the better. And then just make sure you're also, just think about, like, what do you want to show up in Google search for? When people search like WordPress virtual assistant, you're like, that's me. I want to show up there in Google. That's what I want to be known for. Great. Then you need to make sure you are, obviously, like I said, putting that in your page titles, but you also want to put it on the page itself, because Google loves to make sure that your site is relevant, and like you're not just saying that you're a WordPress virtual assistant, but that you actually that's really what you are talking about. So they want to see that you are using the words WordPress and website and assistant and virtual assistant. Like, they want to see all these context clues in your content, because then they're like, okay, so she's really is a WordPress assistant. Because it used to be, 5-10 years ago, that people would just be like, I'm going to optimize this site for like WordPress virtual assistant or whatever. And then you click on the site and it's like, just kidding. This is, I'm, whatever else. And like, you tried to trick them, and like, you were like, oh, I just use these keywords because it was easier to rank for. And I wanted to just get the traffic. And that was all I cared about. So Google caught on to that, and they were like, okay, so they got smarter, and now their algorithm can like read your site and detect, okay, are you talking about these things on your website? Because
yes, I remember those days.
Right? It was scary.
You click on a site and you're just like, this isn't what I clicked on. What is this? And or it's WordPress 15 times in the article.
We don't need that either. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the other thing. We don't want to spam your pages or your blog posts with your keywords. Like, again, Google is really, really smart, and you can actually be penalized for doing too many keywords. Like they catch on if you're like saying
Yeah.
WordPress in every single sentence or whatever. So, and I know now people are like, okay, so I have to put it in there, but not too much. So just make it sound human. And then, maybe like make sure in every other paragraph or so, that's very arbitrary, but like every other paragraph, you have your keywords there in like one of the sentences so that WordPress or, virtual assistant or whatever it is sporadically throughout the post. Because again, that gives Google all the context clues they need.
Yeah, I love it. There's so much that goes into SEO. And I had a client that wanted me to help her SEO the website. I'm like, that is a people's full-time jobs. I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
I
There's
have no
so much
idea
that goes into
where to
it.
start.
Yeah. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, one of the worst, if you want a really bad example of SEO, go to your local dentist websites. Like they always hire SEO companies, and you can see like, hello, we are Atlanta Dentistry. We are in Atlanta, our dentist, and we serve people in Atlanta. So if you're looking for a dentist in Atlanta, we are
Yes.
Atlanta Dentist. It's like,
Yes.
okay, so this doesn't make any sense. And I don't know if other people like notice that or if I'm just hyper aware of it being a web designer, but it is very annoying. And I'm like, no, don't do this.
Yes, I have noticed that. Yeah. And we're actually in the same city. I think we're both in Atlanta area.
Nice.
And I've noticed that with like the spa, again, like you
Yes.
go to the spa websites and it's like Atlanta Spa and Atlanta and women. And I'm just like, who wrote this?
Don't stop doing this. Stop doing this. Yeah. It's whenever I've occasionally had people like reach out to me who were like, hey, I'm thinking about hiring this SEO agency, not like a specific one, just they're like, I'm thinking of hiring an SEO agency. I'm like, what are your thoughts? And I'm like, I'm like, I have lots of thoughts.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going back to like what you said about getting the right host and site speed, I actually probably last year, actually, I had Bluehost and I started with Bluehost. Everybody pitches you Bluehost when you very first start out doing anything, right? So I was food blogging like 10, 15 years ago. So that's where I started. And I'm like, Bluehost, I'm just going to stick with it. It's been good. So last year I'm frustrated because I'm editing my site and it's super slow. And I'm like, what is going on? So I do a site test. It's like 12 seconds. And I'm like,
no.
okay. So literally 10 minutes. I was like, I'm done with this. And I switched to SiteGround like immediately. And then I do the speed test and it's like 1 second. And it was literally, I go back in to edit what I was trying to edit because I couldn't upload the photos. It was being super slow. It's like, oh, we can't upload this. There's an error. And immediately changed like, the blink of an eye. And I was like, oh, it was my host. And then that's when I go and look in and I'm like, oh yeah, find all these articles. I'm like, okay. So now I love SiteGround. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I always like, if you are listening to this and you are like, well, how do I like find, I'm always like, research your options. Do like Bluehost versus SiteGround or whatever. Read several ones and be cautious if they have affiliate links. Like if they're like, I'm an affiliate for Bluehost and I've got a comparison, like, and they are just raving about it. Like as someone who does a lot of like blog posts and YouTube videos about like tech comparisons and like choose this or that. I do usually, yes, I am an affiliate for one of them, not always, but I still try to keep it fair. Like, hey, this is a downfall of whatever platform, or this is a good thing about Bluehost, or, but still at the end of the day, I would recommend, whatever. So just read those blog posts and read several so you can get a good feel of like, what are people actually thinking? And is it just because they're an affiliate or do they truly recommend it?
Yeah. And how do we know if it's time to then take a look at our own website and see if it's time to either rebrand or redesign? Because I would imagine looking at, most people looking at their own website, we all like our website. and we probably think it's great. So, and if nobody says anything, we would go on forever, unless we have an
Yes.
outside opinion. So how do we know when it's time to make a change?
So I would say, like, there's no hard and fast deadline of like, okay, it's been this many years, it's time. You have to redo it. But I would recommend, if it's been like 2 or 3 years, maybe see about getting like a website audit or someone to review your website, where we're not totally overhauling it, but maybe it's just, get a fresh pair of eyes on it. What do you need to tweak in terms of design, copy, SEO, anything like that? But I do think most people, not everyone, but most, around the 4 to 5 year mark, need a totally new website
Yeah.
or a big overhaul. And that's because, I mean, think about where you were 5 years ago. Like, you may not have been in business, you may have just started, your
Yep.
business, your services have changed, your offers have changed. I mean, I can't think of anybody that in 5 years hasn't made big changes to the market they serve, or they have new offers, they have new photos, which, I mean, obviously photos can be added. And yes, you can obviously add, and hopefully have added,
Mhm.
these new pictures and new services to your site. But it always, after a while, it can start to feel kind of pieced together, when we're like, oh, we have a new service. Let's
Oh,
just
yeah.
add this. Okay, well, now I have new this product. Let me just like stick that on that page. And okay, let me just like put this over here. Like, we're just trying to like, fit into that. So it's kind of like when you are like, oh man, I need to move into a bigger apartment or a bigger house or whatever, because you're like, I'm running out of room. Or
Mhm.
okay, so we're just trying to make this work, and we're trying to make this work, and that kind of thing. So again, 2 to 3 years, maybe get it reviewed, get an audit. And around the 4 to 5 year mark, you might think about, okay, do I need to get a whole new website? Doesn't necessarily mean you have to
Mhm.
rebrand. You don't have to like go get a new logo and colors and everything like that. Some
Yeah.
do, but some don't. But yeah, it's not that we are like, ooh, we want to stay trendy and look great, like whatever. But yeah, it's just, you want to stay current and make sure your site really does have a good experience for your users.
Yeah. And then what are some of the things, if we're talking about rebranding, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see, or that you're like, that's kind of cringy, you hate seeing on websites?
The biggest thing is being super trendy. I remember like 5 or 6 years ago, I was in a group of like creative professionals, and it was like designers, calligraphers, photographers, and all of the photographers were using like these very similar script fonts, and
Mhm.
they were everywhere. And then there was, I'm sure you remember, like rose gold, when rose gold was everywhere.
Uh-huh.
Not just in websites and branding, but then like the iPhone was rose gold, and like all that. So uh, don't hop too far into trends.
Mhm.
Like, yes, there's something to be said about looking current, but we don't need to look trendy, because then yes, in 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
people are going to look at your logo and be like, your logo was designed in 2017 when whatever it is was trendy, and we can tell.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so that's the first thing. The second thing is, your logo does not have to have an image of like whatever it is that you do. Again, photographers, not to pick on photographers, but
Mhm.
they love to have like a camera or a
Yeah.
lens in their logo. And I'm like, McDonald's does not have a hamburger in their logo, guys. So don't feel like you have, yes, sometimes it fits and sometimes it's
Mhm.
not cliche. Like, maybe you're a book editor and you have some books in your logo and it doesn't look cliche. Great. I think when it's forced, that's when you're like, oh, I'm going to replace this letter with this picture, the lens, or the books are going to make the I or the L in my name or something. Like, we don't need to force it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are like the two things. Don't be trendy, and don't feel like you have to put like a picture of whatever it is that you do in your logo, especially for us online business owners. Like, as a web designer, like, what am I going to put, like a laptop in my my logo? Like, no, I'm not. So if it works, if it doesn't look cringy, then go for it. But don't feel like, oh man, I have to give these context clues for like what it is I do in my logo.
And there's still some fonts that when I land on websites, I'm like,
Oh my
that
gosh.
font, I hate it. And you know
Lobster.
exactly what font it is, and you're like,
Yes.
oh, that's Salsify or whatever, and you're just like,
Yeah.
I hate you.
Lobster is one of the ones that
Oh my goodness.
I still see every once in a while. I think it's kind of faded out,
Mhm.
but it's one that when I see it, I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Please stop using
Yeah.
that font.
Yeah.
But
Love
yeah.
it. All right. And then how do you, as far as inquiry forms on a website, like I know I have contact pages and schedule. How do you use inquiry forms on your website, like to the best of how you can use them?
Yeah. So inquiry forms are literally like my favorite ways to tell clients to, like, it's like, this is what you should really like focus on your, not the only thing, but I'm like, please put some effort into this. It will be a huge time saver for both you and your clients. And so most people, I feel like, just have a very basic contact form: name, email, message. They might say like, oh, like,
Mhm.
please check the box of what service you're interested in, and that's it. Well, that typically doesn't give you enough information of that potential client. So then you have to be like, hi, Jessica. Thanks so much for reaching out about my VA services. Can you tell me more about like what you're wanting and what type of business you are and what's your budget? And like, then you have to go back and forth, or obviously you could also get on a call, that too. But I have been using my inquiry form, I don't even know, for like 7 years now. And I've tweaked it along the way, but it helps me so much because I can literally tell at a glance of this. I get the email that's like, hey, you have a new inquiry. And I can see right away,
Mhm.
okay, Amy is a photographer. She's looking for this kind of help. This is her deadline. This is her budget, like whatever. Good. I think I can help her. Or it's like, hey, Jim Bob from the auto parts store somehow found your website and wants a new website, but only has $75. Okay. Sorry, Jim. I don't think I can help you. Best wishes. Like, I can send those types of emails. Very nice. Like,
Mhm.
hey, I don't think we're a good fit. And I usually say, like, based on your timeline or your needs or your budget or whatever. And then I don't have
Yeah.
to waste 17 back and forth emails or hopping on a 30-minute call just to be like, oh, sorry,
Mhm.
actually, I don't think we're a good fit.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I usually say keep it under or around like 8 questions. Like, that usually
Mhm.
feels like a good amount of questions, because we don't need the full picture of, like, I'm not asking in my inquiry form, I'm not like, please list the functionalities that you want in your website.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's, I'm getting an idea of like what their business is, why they want a website, that kind of stuff. And usually they will say like, oh, I want to sell products, or I just need to list my services, or like, I've rebranded, I need a new website. So then I can say like, oh, great, like, yes, I can help you set up a shop, or great, I can implement your branding. That's totally fine. So it not only helps me get a good picture of who I might be helping, but I can also potentially answer more questions when they're like, hey, I'm wondering about this, or I've rebranded. I can kind of reassure them like, great, like, I'm not going to change your branding again. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not here to change your branding if you just got it done. So I can just implement those colors and fonts, add your logo, obviously, and then we're smooth sailing. So then they don't even have to ask me that question because I've already answered them up front.
Yeah, that's so good. That
Yeah.
definitely would eliminate a lot of, just enter your name, phone number, email, and, and because if you just
Message.
put a box of tell me what you want, you'll never really get all the answers.
No.
Right?
No, you won't. So all the main contact on my website is my inquiry form. I do have a
Wow, that's
contact
awesome.
form that's
Mhm.
like linked in my footer, but like when you open it, it says like, this is not the form to fill out if you want to work with me. If you fill this out, I'm not going to reply to you. Like, and I'm like, because if you can't follow basic instructions that say this is not the form to fill out if you want to work with me, then I'm like, we're already not a good fit.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So use that inquiry form. And even if you have different services, like I know some people have like, one-to-one consulting, a 3-month package, and then like a group program, you can have slightly different questions for each service or offer. So just think about like, what is the bare minimum of like information I need that would help me see if this person is a good fit or not. And I will say, yes, there are times that I get an inquiry and I'm like, okay, well, they didn't put a ton of information here. So I'm like, they might be a good fit. They might not. Like, so sometimes I'm like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more? Because you were super short in your answers. But like 99% of the time, I get a really good picture of like, okay, perfect. This is a business I can help. I think, I can clarify this kind of information, but overall, it looks like we would be a good fit to work together.
Awesome. So Jess, let us know what your favorite apps and tools are that you are working with right now.
Honestly, I think one of my favorites is HoneyBook. And that's what I use for my contracts, invoices, questionnaires, all that. Like it's the whole like client portal basically. And it is a huge time saver because literally that's where the inquiry forms come in. So it's like, okay, Angela filled out my inquiry form. We talked. She's going to hire me. I can like go to her little tab and then send the contract. And then I have like a whole onboarding sequence of emails. And then it's like, okay, schedule your call. Here's the questionnaire. So I literally click like one button and then she gets all the communication and I don't have to do any of it. So I like when I think about when I used to not have HoneyBook and I used to do it all by hand and I'd be like, okay, here's the contract and invoice. And then I'd be like, oh crap, I got to send Angela my questionnaire. And we should have scheduled our call last week. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So that's one of my favorites. And then I also really love SocialBee, which is a social media scheduler. And it reschedules your content. So I really only use it for like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. But it just like I have this library of content and it's like, okay, we're going to like send out these posts. Okay, we've gone through all 500 or however many there are. Okay, now we're going to like restart. So like my blogs and my videos keep being pushed out on social media. And so I still have like a presence there without having to actually be there and spend a lot of time. Because really like Instagram and YouTube are like my main content platforms that I use. So I'm like, I really want to spend my energy there, but at least having a presence on these other platforms, I think is important. Just in case someone happens to find me. Like last week, somebody tagged, not me, but my business page in a Facebook group. Someone was asking for a web designer. And I was like, I don't even know who you are. Like, thank you for tagging me. But I was like, I mean, she knew my business name. And so she just tagged my business page instead of me. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not super active over there. I check the messages, the inbox or whatever, but I'm not, overly active on it. So those two tools save me a ton of time in my business.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to point out that those two that you mentioned, they allow you to automate a whole
Yes.
lot of stuff, saving you time. So how long do you think it took you to set up your like HoneyBook and, get all your things in Social Bay? Because I think that's
Um,
probably the biggest thing that people are like, when they start to automate, it's like, oh, but all the upfront stuff, it's going to take me
mhm.
so much time, you
Yeah.
know?
I would say like maybe a day for each.
Mm-hmm.
Social Bee probably took a little bit, it probably took a few days because I was using another scheduler and I had to like move it all over
Yeah.
manually. And there wasn't like an export option.
Right.
So
Oh,
it was like, okay, I'm just gonna sit here and copy paste like all day. But yeah, and I don't know if it took like a full day for HoneyBook, but um yeah, it was a nice and easy setup. And then I've just kind of added things the more
as
I've
you
used
go.
it. So
Mm-hmm.
like my email sequence wasn't as long like when I started as it is now. Now I have multiple questionnaires because I'm like, oh, like I could use this questionnaire if we're only doing XYZ, and I can use this questionnaire, whatever. But when I first started, it was like, here's my questionnaire, here's my one contract, and here's, like these other, 3 emails they get or whatever. So don't feel like you have to like have a full email sequence or everything figured out.
Mm.
You can kind of start with the bare basics with whatever you're using.
Cool. Thanks. That's a good
Yeah.
tip because everybody's always like thinking that they can't move forward until they
Mm,
have everything in place. And I
yeah.
think, they get held back and they put things
Mhm.
off and procrastinate and then they never end up doing it. So
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's
like I know people who use like HoneyBook or Dubsado or whatever, and they like I can think of one friend that she uses HoneyBook for like the invoices and whatnot, but she hasn't like moved over her questionnaires. She doesn't have like like an email sequence that she uses. Like she
yeah.
just that's not part of her process,
Hmm.
but she just really uses it for contracts and invoices. And so it's like, yeah, she should move over the questionnaires. But for right now, like, okay, like at least I have the invoices are automated and that takes something off your plate. And
Hmm.
then hopefully eventually she'll move over the other things and can set up some more automations there.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right. Lastly, we have covered so much. So
we have.
if somebody was looking to optimize their website and get started this week, what is your one action step for them?
I would say go read the headlines on your website. And are they clear? Like have
Mhm.
someone else read them, whether like someone who doesn't go to your website a lot, whether that's
Oh,
like
yeah.
people on your Instagram or like business friends, your partner, a friend, like someone who doesn't go to your website a ton and super familiar with your business.
Mhm.
um, and see, like, just tell them, like, read this really quick, not the whole page, just this part. Does it make sense? Do you understand what I do? And see what they say.
Oh, good. Thanks. So,
Yeah.
Jess, if our listeners want to connect with you, where is the best place that they can reach out?
Yeah. So, of course, my website is jesscreatives.com. And like I said, I'm super active on Instagram. So, at Jess Creatives over there.
Thank you so much. If you are watching the video, you can see Jess Creatives and at Jess Creatives on the screen right now. Otherwise, I will drop those in the show notes for anyone else that's watching. And thank you so much, Jess, for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's all we have for today. I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Coffee Powered Systems. You can find links to everything mentioned in the episode down in the show notes or on the website at mirandamerton.com. If you enjoyed this episode, rate and review it in iTunes or where you enjoy listening so others can find it too. And join me here next time.